In the build up to the long awaited Space Marine 2, I've been absorbing all sorts of Warhammer content, but one area that is very on brand to me has been missing from that, and that is virtual reality. But not to worry, there's a Space Marine 2 VR experience coming to some set locations around the world, and it lands in October in the UK, so I will probably go and try that out, because that seems to be pretty incredible. It's one of those experiences where you can go along with some friends and play in the same room and basically kill Tyranids, I assume. But there is one other Warhammer VR experience that you can try at home if you've got a VR headset that I'd actually never heard of before stumbling upon it on Steam. This is Warhammer Battlesister, a game where you become a Sister of Battle and take on legions of chaos. Upon seeing it on Steam, I knew nothing about it and immediately looked at the reviews, ranging from, the game's okay and pretty fun, and this is one of the worst things I've ever played. So immediately, I then bought it, installed it, and booted it up. So, how does Warhammer's first foray into virtual reality stack up, and what can the Space Marine VR experience learn from this? Because there is a lot to be learned here, if I'm honest. And that is because Battlesister is not great. But in the elements where it's bad, it's not confusing bad. We can break it down pretty easily and see where the pitfalls are and probably why they are the way they are. So we're going to break this down into a bunch of segments in no particular order, starting with the story of Battlesister. It's fairly straightforward and I'm going to spoil it all for you now. So if you're going to play Battlesister and you really don't want to be spoiled, skip ahead by about a minute or so, or whatever the chapter markers say if there are chapter markers. Anyway, the story of the game follows a Sister of Battle called Ophelia fighting against the forces of chaos with another Sister of Battle. That Sister of Battle dies and tells Ophelia that her long lost sister is still alive, who died supposedly 10 years ago. You then go on a little quest across the galaxy to try and find your sister, who's apparently been kidnapped by a Psyker. You end up catching up to the Psyker on a world of the Imperium. You find out that there is a Necron tomb, which is very, very cool. We'll get into a bit. In that Imperium world, you fight the Psyker, the mask comes off, it's revealed that the sister is actually the Psyker, you fight her, and then she dies. It's perfectly serviceable, but everything in terms of character falls flat because you know nothing really about any of the people that you're actually fighting with. That's part of the course for some Warhammer media where a lot of the characters are quite stoic, but here the stoic characters are written kind of edgily like I would when I was 14, or are just incredibly boring to listen to. Even Ophelia, the main character, is kind of a blank slate for the player. Even though she has thoughts and feelings, they are all about finding her sister, and that is pretty much it. The other two prominent characters are an Inquisitor who spouts exposition at you and is a normal callous Inquisitor type, and another young Sister of Battle that joins you that is pretty much just suicidal and wants to die in battle the entire time, which is part of the course. However, as I said, none of these really stand out, and the entire story is engaging, but not enough to really make you think at all. It's just enough to keep you strung along from set piece to set piece as you fight your way through the game. Speaking of which, the gameplay consists of shooting, stabbing, shooting, pulling some levers, and shooting. What I can say is the combat here is quite accurate to the Warhammer lore. All the weapons feel punchy when they should. They've all got very neat mechanics to them, such as the plasma pistol exploding if you overheat it, the chainsaw being able to be revved up, the melter gun absolutely blasting things in short range. Everything feels good here, aside from one weapon which we'll get into in a little bit in my negative section. The violence here is punchy with dismemberment being present, which is awesome, and there's quite a lot of enemy variety as well, with demons, chaos cultists, terminators, bloodletters, and even, as I said earlier, Necrons, which is a very, very welcome surprise, even if there is only, say, one type of them, and you fight a couple of them only in the last level of the game. Speaking of levels, there are 11 of them, although 3 of them are just exposition scenes that move on to the next, and the overall game is about 3.5 hours long, which is maybe a little bit overpriced for the £15 that you pay for it, but to be honest, I've paid more for shorter games, so runtime here can vary in terms of if you find it good value for money or not. The combat with normal enemies is also split up by various boss fights throughout the game, which are actually a really good spectacle. However, most of these are just set in flat arenas with no cover, which is really confusing to me. There's one fight with an Imperial Knight, which is fantastic as a spectacle and really, really cool, where you have to blast off each of its weapons and then take it down. But the other two boss fights in the game, with one of the Chaos Scorpions and the final boss fight of the game, are just set in flat open arenas with no cover, where you just have to avoid attacks and fire back. That is pretty much it. Your melee weapons can be used to deflect attacks back as well, and each of the weapons sound the part too. They're reloaded by bringing them to your hip or grabbing a magazine from your hip and loading it. There's 2 options there. However, this does lead to a problem which we'll talk about again in the negative section. Finally, it really gets across the scale of Warhammer right. These locations, as you traverse through them, come across in a way that I haven't really seen before. The flat screen games can do it justice on a big TV, but there's nothing quite like being there in full VR, real scale, and seeing how large some of these, say, cathedral ships are, or for an example, an Imperial Knight. It's quite awe-inspiring to see these two fight in front of you in the opening section of the game, and then to be escorted by one later is simply fantastic. You also have several powers with your rosary, like stopping time, giving yourself an invulnerable shield, or doing a force push type blast forward. This is used really for clearing obstacles, but it can be used on enemies, but I really just opted for the invulnerable shield when I unlocked it, or slowing time when I unlocked that as well. These are gesture controlled though, so can be a bit finicky and don't go off all the time. And I don't think, from what I can tell, there is a recharge indicator, so it just kind of goes off every couple seconds when you want it to. And you've kind of got to guess when it's back to full, so you're able to use it again. Now that's most of the good, and there is a fair bit of good. That's like 7 minutes of good for Battlesister that I did enjoy. And overall, the package here as a Warhammer fan is fun. However, there's a lot of problems which I'm assuming are mostly related to budget for this thing. One of them being that the LOD pop-in is pretty horrendous and the textures aren't great in places, meaning you'll be walking along and you'll see a texture pop in into a high fidelity version of the model. I'd say high in quotations there, but compared to the longer LOD model, it is much higher, and then pop back out when you walk only a few more feet away. I'm on the highest settings on PC here, and it's still a prevalent problem, and I hear on the Quest version it's even worse. As I said, the reloads have a problem as well, which is when you try and take your hand off double gripping a weapon, so say you're holding a bolter with your left hand on the front and right hand on the trigger, if you bring it down to your hip and release your left hand, it'll also draw a magazine from your hip. This will lead to the mag sometimes being ejected from your current weapon, and then also sometimes not filling in with the new one, meaning you could be preparing for a firefight and wanting to shoot someone, and then you pull your weapon up and there's no mag in it because it has been ejected due to this oversight in the mechanic. As I said in the story section, the voice acting and writing isn't the best. It seems very edgy at times. Accuracy for the most part, as I said earlier, is good, but some weapons are a little off. For example, the lasgun works more like a Star Wars blaster rather than how lasguns actually operate in Warhammer visually, which I think was done for balancing, but I would have taken accuracy over balancing really with this one for a little bit of less damage output, for example. There's quite a lot of clipping as well in terms of models and movement. Enemies can sometimes just phase through doors and objects. This is especially bad during the later sections, which are slightly less polished in the game, such as the Imperial Knight escort that I talked about before. It kind of just walks through certain objects and also doesn't sit level on the ground, so it does just float while it's walking. It was an awesome set piece, but it really takes you out of it when the Imperial Knight is slightly like no clipping across the ground while it's giving you covering fire. The same can be said for some environmental effects as well. When, say, a plasma pistol explodes, you're meant to throw it on the ground and then it'll explode and leave a big burn score mark on the earth. However, this occurs at whatever level the plasma explodes at, so if you don't throw it away and it explodes in your hand, it won't kill you, but it will leave a massive crater mark in the middle of the air where your head is. The sounds for enemies are also scuffed, as they have seemingly no direction or scale for distance sometimes. So you'll be attacked by an enemy in the front, but their voice may come from behind or all around you. So you have no idea if you're being flanked or not, which is just really frustrating. Some animations are absolutely hilarious as well, like the Space Marine character that escorts you throughout the game. He will occasionally say a voice line and then sprint off into the distance in a hilariously sped up waddle animation, but I'm assuming this is just a time or budget constraint thing as well, but it is funny nonetheless. Some weapons like the Flamer also have attacks that look more like the Proton Pack beam from Ghostbusters rather than actual flames. And finally, I had quite a few game-breaking bugs in terms of the pause menu. I sometimes pause to either have a drink of water or check my phone because I played through the entire game in 2 sittings. And sometimes when I unpause the game, the entire world would just not be there. I would be left there floating in a skybox, which was fun. And then also, every time you unpause or pause the game, or restart from a checkpoint after dying, which may happen a lot because the time to kill for you is incredibly low, both your weapons will be dropped by default, so you'll have to pick them back up off the floor, which can lead to your death if you're fumbling around trying to pick them up again while being shot at when a checkpoint reloads, or you unpause the game, which is fun. That was another 7 minutes of rambling about the negatives, and to be honest, that's made me think that the game is awful, but it's not. It's actually alright. I had a good time with it as a Warhammer fan. It's also, aside from the campaign, got a co-op or single-player multiplayer horde mode, which is quite cool with a leaderboard. but the campaign did disappoint despite having some cool moments and set pieces to keep you engaged. I am eagerly awaiting the release of Space Marine 2 in the coming weeks. That's going to be fantastic. But this was my take on Warhammer's only VR game for the moment until October, when the Space Marine 2 VR experience comes around to select locations around the world. It's one of the ones where you'll have to group up with a bunch of friends or randoms and go in and kind of have a VR headset on in an actual real space. Without controllers, I don't think you'll just be walking around and killing Tyranids, I guess, which is quite cool. Anyway, thank you all for watching. If you did enjoy, please feel free to like and subscribe. Let me know what you think of the game. Do you think it looks awful? Are you a Warhammer fan? Do you know what it is? Did you just click on the video and then listen to me ramble for 7 to 10 minutes about the game? Please do let me know. Thank you to our patrons and YouTube members: Luke Bentley, Phil Irving, Hazit Mirza, Ace Gamer, Hippie Pickle, Jin 007, A License to Chill, Sun WTF, Fat Controllers, Jason Parker, Lamar Hall, Jordy Bansma, Lemon64K, Callum Tierney, Mischievous Marco, The Underground Game Cat, Brian East, Alajimbe, D2Y, Underground Stranger Game Cat, The Game Cat, Andrew Ehrenreich, Mark Smith, X King X Ping, Jazafash, The Legacy of Game Cat, Hooked Worm, The Hoosier Game Cat, Outcast VR, Prophecy 777, Test Rate Review, Salvador, Wade, FNCS Kieran, and Sean Krim. Thank you all for watching. Thank you to them for supporting the channel, and I hope to see you all in the next one.